It was a quiet evening, and David could barely breathe. His heart, worn thin from years of stress and disappointment, had stopped beating. In a desperate moment, a sudden realization struck him: all the money in the world, all the success he had achieved, meant nothing without love. As his chest tightened, a single thought pierced through the haze of fear: I never got the chance to say goodbye. But then something incredible happened. His heart restarted. It wasn't just his heart, it was his entire life, back from the brink. And that night, David's heart would lead him to someone he thought he had lost forever. Before we dive into David's amazing story, don't forget to subscribe to Kindness Lights. If you believe in the power of small moments and the impact they have on our lives, like this video and leave a comment below. Your support helps us spread positivity to more people every single day. Now, let's go back to the beginning. David had been a single dad for 5 years after his wife, Emily, passed away suddenly. They'd been high school sweethearts, and when she died, it felt like the light had gone out of his world. She'd been the love of his life, and he'd promised her that he would always take care of their daughter, Sophie. After her death, David buried himself in work, putting in long hours to grow his business. For a while, he kept his personal life at arm's length, afraid to let anyone into his heart again. But life had a way of pushing him forward, and eventually, his friends convinced him to try a blind date. The evening of the date, David was nervous but excited. He had no idea who his date would be, just that she was someone his friend thought he'd get along with. David showed up at the restaurant a little early and took a seat by the window, glancing over the menu but not really paying attention. His mind kept wandering back to Sophie, how much he missed Emily and the life they used to have. When the door to the restaurant opened, David looked up to see a woman walk in. Her long, dark red hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her elegant white dress seemed to glow in the soft lighting. As she made her way toward him, something in David's heart skipped a beat. She looked so familiar, but there was no way, was it possible? Her name was Julia. The moment their eyes met, David's heart gave another lurch. The years melted away, and for an instant, it was as though Emily was standing before him. Julia smiled softly, and David stood up, his hand reaching out instinctively. He couldn't explain it, but the warmth he felt was undeniable. "David," she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, "it's really you." The shock was overwhelming. His heart raced as he sat back down, trying to process what was happening. He hadn't seen Julia in over a decade. She was Emily's best friend, the one person who had always been there, especially when the pain of loss was too much to bear. But after Emily's passing, Julia had vanished from his life, slipping away in the shadows of grief. David had thought she moved on, that she'd found someone else, that their paths would never cross again. But here she was, sitting in front of him, with the same familiar eyes and the same comforting presence that had always made him feel safe. "Why did you disappear?" David asked, his voice thick with emotion. Julia took a deep breath, her fingers gently brushing the edge of her wine glass. "I needed to heal too, David. It wasn't just you who was lost. But I never forgot you, or Emily." For a long moment, they just sat there in silence. The restaurant hummed with life around them, but it was as if the world had stopped for just the two of them. It wasn't just a reunion, it was a moment of pure connection, as if the universe had brought them together again for a reason. Julia explained that, after Emily's death, she had taken a step back to focus on her own healing. But through all the years, she had never stopped caring for David. She had heard about his growing business, his success, and how he'd built everything from the ground up. But despite the success, David had always seemed so alone. Julia had always hoped that one day, they might reconnect. Over dinner, they talked about everything, memories of Emily, their old friends, and how life had unfolded since those days. As the night wore on, something began to change between them. David realized that his heart, once shattered into 1,000 pieces, was slowly mending. The kindness Julia had shown him during their darkest days was like a thread pulling him back to life. When the night ended, they stood up together, and David didn't want to say goodbye. He asked her if they could meet again. And from that night on, something beautiful blossomed between them, a quiet, steady love rooted in shared pain, kindness, and healing. As the years passed, David's business continued to thrive. He had turned a small startup into a billion-dollar company, but the true success of his life lay not in the wealth he had accumulated, but in the love he had rediscovered. With Julia by his side, they became a power couple, not just in business, but in life. Together, they showed the world that even the darkest moments can lead to something beautiful if you're open to kindness and healing. David often reflects on the moment he thought his heart had stopped. It was more than just a medical event, it was a reminder that life is fragile and that kindness, even in the smallest forms, can change everything. Without Julia's compassion, without the kindness they both shared, he wouldn't have found his way back. So, what's the lesson here? Kindness doesn't just heal, it brings us back to life. No matter how dark things may seem, there's always a way forward, a chance to start again. And sometimes, the kindness we give and receive is the thread that connects us to the love and happiness we deserve. If you've ever felt alone or lost, remember David's story. There's always hope, and you never know how one small act of kindness might change your life. So, spread kindness, and you might just find the light you've been searching for. Thank you for watching Kindness Lights. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share it with someone who needs